Part 1: The End of a Melody. Lily Parker sat on the worn-out leather couch in her tiny apartment, staring at the battered acoustic guitar in her lap. The strings were frayed, and the wood was scarred with years of use, but the guitar had once been her lifeline. It had been her voice when she couldn't find the words, her comfort when the world became too much to bear. But now, it felt like an echo of something that had died long ago. It had been 6 months since she walked away from her last gig. 6 months since she had finally ended her toxic relationship with Kyle, the man who had simultaneously been her biggest supporter and her greatest source of pain. He had pushed her to chase her dreams, to perform in small bars and clubs, but he had also been the one to tear her down, to make her feel like she wasn't good enough. For years, Lily had let Kyle's voice replace her own, convincing herself that his harsh criticisms were just tough love, that his jealousy was just passion. But after one too many nights of screaming matches and empty apologies, she had finally made the decision to leave. And when she did, she had left her music behind as well. Lily ran her fingers over the guitar strings, feeling their familiar roughness under her fingertips. She hadn't played since that night, since the moment she had packed her things and walked out of Kyle's apartment without looking back. It wasn't that she didn't want to play, music had always been her passion, but every time she picked up the guitar, the memories of Kyle came flooding back, and the pain was too much to bear. The guitar felt broken now, just like she did. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling her from her thoughts. Lily glanced at the screen to see a text from her best friend, Jamie. "Hey, I'm coming over. We're going out tonight." Lily sighed. She didn't have the energy for a night out, but Jamie was relentless when it came to dragging her out of her apartment. Since the breakup, Jamie had made it her mission to get Lily back on her feet, even if it meant forcing her into social situations she wasn't ready for. She glanced at the guitar one last time before setting it down on the couch and heading to her bedroom to get ready. Maybe Jamie was right, maybe a night out would help her forget, at least for a little while. Part 2: The Bar with No Name. The bar was loud and crowded, the air thick with the scent of beer and sweat. Lily followed Jamie through the throngs of people, her eyes scanning the room for a quiet corner where she could hide from the noise. But Jamie had other plans. She led them straight to the bar, where she ordered 2 drinks and handed one to Lily. "Come on," Jamie said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "This is exactly what you need. A night out, some good music, maybe a little flirting." Lily forced a smile, taking a sip of her drink. She appreciated Jamie's efforts to cheer her up, but the truth was, she didn't feel like herself anymore. The confident, ambitious girl who had once dreamed of making it big in the music industry felt like a distant memory. Now, she was just trying to get through each day without falling apart. "Maybe I'll just sit this one out," Lily said, glancing at the stage where a band was setting up. "I'm not really in the mood for dancing." Jamie rolled her eyes. "You say that now, but just wait until the music starts. You won't be able to resist." Lily doubted that, but she didn't argue. Instead, she leaned against the bar and let her mind wander as she watched the band prepare for their set. The lead singer was a tall, lanky guy with messy hair and a soulful voice that reminded her of the indie musicians she used to admire. For a moment, she felt a pang of longing, a reminder of the life she had left behind. The band started playing, and the music filled the bar, a mix of acoustic melodies and soft percussion that seemed to flow through the room like a warm breeze. Lily closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of something, a tiny flicker of the passion she used to feel when she played. But just as quickly, the spark faded, replaced by the familiar weight of grief and loss. She opened her eyes and took another sip of her drink, trying to push the feelings away. As the band played their final song, the lead singer stepped up to the microphone and smiled at the crowd. "We've got one more for you tonight, but before we play it, I'd like to invite someone very special up to the stage." Lily's heart sank as she realized what was happening. She had seen this kind of thing before, musicians pulling random people from the audience to sing or play along as a gimmick. And sure enough, the lead singer's eyes landed on her. "You there," he said, pointing directly at her. "Come on up. I can tell you've got a song in your heart." Lily's face flushed with embarrassment, and she shook her head quickly. No, I'm just here to watch." But Jamie wasn't having it. She nudged Lily forward with a grin. "Go on. This is your chance." Lily shot her a look, but before she could protest, the lead singer was calling for her again, and the crowd was starting to cheer. She felt trapped. She hadn't performed in months, hadn't even picked up her guitar since the breakup, and the idea of getting on stage in front of all these people made her stomach churn with anxiety. But there was something else, too, something deeper. A part of her wanted to say yes. A part of her wanted to feel that spark again, to remember what it was like to lose herself in the music, to forget about Kyle and the heartbreak and just be Lily Parker, the girl who loved to play. She hesitated for a moment longer before finally standing up. The crowd cheered as she made her way to the stage, and the lead singer handed her an acoustic guitar. It wasn't her guitar, but it felt familiar enough in her hands, the weight of it grounding her as she stood in front of the microphone. "What's your name?" the lead singer asked, his voice warm and encouraging. "Lily," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise of the crowd. "Well, Lily," he said with a grin, "how about you play us something?" Lily's heart raced as she looked down at the guitar. Her fingers hovered over the strings, uncertain, but then she took a deep breath and began to play. The chords came to her naturally, the muscle memory kicking in despite her months of silence. It wasn't perfect, her fingers were rusty, and the guitar wasn't tuned exactly the way she liked it, but for the first time in months, she felt alive. The crowd quieted as she played, their attention focused on her, and Lily closed her eyes, letting the music carry her. She played a song she had written years ago, before Kyle, before the heartbreak, back when music was her whole world. It was a simple melody, but it was hers, and as she played, she felt a piece of herself returning. When she finished, the crowd erupted into applause, and for a moment, Lily felt like the girl she used to be. She smiled, her chest swelling with a mixture of relief and pride. Maybe she wasn't broken after all. Part 3: A Chance Encounter. As Lily made her way back to the bar, her heart still racing from the performance, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see the lead singer standing behind her, a friendly smile on his face. "You were amazing up there," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "You've got a real gift." Lily blushed, still feeling the adrenaline from the performance. "Thanks." I haven't played in a while. Could have fooled me, he said with a grin. I'm Jake, by the way. Lily, she said, shaking his hand. Well, Lily, if you ever feel like playing again, you should come by the studio sometime, Jake said, pulling a card from his back pocket and handing it to her. We're always looking for new talent, and I think you'd fit right in. Lily stared at the card, her mind racing. She hadn't thought about recording music in months, hadn't even considered the possibility of stepping back into the world of songwriting and performing. But now, with the weight of the guitar still fresh in her hands and the lingering buzz of the crowd's applause in her ears, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, it was time to start again. Thanks, Lily said, slipping the card into her pocket. I'll think about it. Jake smiled, giving her a small nod before heading back to the stage to pack up. Lily watched him go, her thoughts swirling. Could she really do it? Could she step back into the world of music after everything that had happened? Or was she just setting herself up for more disappointment? As she turned back to Jamie, who was grinning from ear to ear, Lily felt a strange mix of hope and fear. Maybe this was the chance she had been waiting for. Maybe this was her opportunity to reclaim the part of herself she had lost. Or maybe it was just another broken promise waiting to happen. Part 4: A New Beginning. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that Jake's offer was more than just a casual invitation. It felt like a door creaking open, a door she had long since shut and locked after walking away from Kyle and her old life. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Jake's card rested on the nightstand next to her, taunting her with possibilities. She hadn't told Jamie much about what had happened with Kyle, just the broad strokes. Jamie knew that Kyle had been toxic, that he had made Lily feel like she was never good enough, but she didn't know the details. She didn't know about the countless nights Lily had spent crying after another one of his cruel critiques of her music, or the way he had convinced her that her career would never take off without him. It had taken everything in Lily to leave him, and even now, months later, she still felt the ghost of his influence lingering in her mind. She wanted to move on, wanted to be the girl she used to be, the girl who believed in herself, who played music because it brought her joy, not because she was trying to prove something to someone who would never be satisfied. But was she ready? The next morning, Lily sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and staring at Jake's card. The studio was only a few blocks away, close enough that she could walk there if she wanted to. She had looked it up online earlier, Sunset Studios. It was a small, independent recording space, popular with up-and-coming local artists. It wasn't a big, flashy studio like the ones Kyle had dragged her to, but it seemed more authentic. Real. She wasn't sure what she expected, but after so many months of silence, the idea of making music again felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Could she really step back into that world? Could she reclaim her voice after everything that had happened? There was only one way to find out. With a deep breath, Lily grabbed her jacket and slipped Jake's card into her pocket. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she was willing to try. And maybe that was enough. Part 5: Sunset Studios. Sunset Studios was a small, unassuming building tucked between a vintage record store and a coffee shop. It didn't look like much from the outside, but as Lily stepped through the front door, she immediately felt a sense of calm. The walls were covered in posters of local bands, and the air smelled faintly of incense and old wood. Behind the counter sat a woman with short, spiky hair and a friendly smile. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Jake," Lily said, her voice a little shaky. The woman grinned. "You must be Lily. Jake told me you might stop by." She stood up and gestured for Lily to follow her. "Come on, I'll take you to the studio." Lily followed the woman down a narrow hallway lined with doors, each one labeled with the name of a different recording booth. The sound of music drifted from one of the rooms, soft acoustic guitar mixed with gentle vocals. It reminded Lily of the nights she had spent in the makeshift studio Kyle had set up in his apartment, recording songs late into the night while he watched over her with a critical eye. She pushed the memory aside and focused on the present. This wasn't Kyle's studio. This was something new. Something different. The woman led Lily into a small recording room where Jake was sitting at a mixing console, adjusting the levels on a track. He looked up when they entered and smiled. "Hey, you made it." Lily smiled back, though her nerves were still buzzing. "Yeah, I figured I'd check it out." Jake gestured to the chair next to him. "Take a seat. Let's talk." Lily sat down, her hands resting in her lap as she glanced around the room. It was cozy, with dim lighting and shelves lined with guitars and other instruments. The atmosphere was relaxed, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the pressure of having to prove herself. "So," Jake said, turning to face her. "I wasn't kidding the other night, you've got talent, Lily. Real talent. I can tell just by the way you played that you've got something special. And I think it's time you start making music again." Lily bit her lip, unsure of how to respond. "I don't know. It's been a while since I've really played. I'm not sure if I'm ready." Jake nodded, his expression understanding. "I get it. But you don't have to be perfect. Music isn't about being perfect. It's about expression. It's about feeling something and sharing that with the world." Lily looked down at her hands, the memory of Kyle's harsh words still fresh in her mind. "I used to think that, but it's hard. I had someone in my life who made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like no matter what I did, it would never be enough." Jake's expression softened. "I'm sorry you went through that. But listen, whoever that person was, they were wrong. You are good enough. More than good enough. And if you're willing to take a chance on yourself, I think you'll see that." Lily swallowed hard, her emotions swirling. She wanted to believe Jake, wanted to believe that she could still be the girl who loved music, the girl who played because it made her feel alive. But the scars Kyle had left on her heart were deep, and she wasn't sure if she could overcome them. Jake must have sensed her hesitation because he reached over and gently placed his hand on hers. "No pressure, okay? This is your journey. You get to decide how you want to take it. But if you're willing, I'd love to help you find your voice again." Lily looked up at him, her heart pounding. She had spent so long trying to forget, trying to bury the part of herself that loved music. But now, sitting here in this small studio, with someone who believed in her, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she wasn't broken after all. Part 6, The First Step. Over the next few weeks, Lily found herself returning to Sunset Studios more often than she had expected. What had initially been a tentative step back into the world of music soon became a regular part of her life. She started by playing simple acoustic sets, just her and the guitar, working through songs she had written years ago but never had the confidence to share. Jake was patient with her, offering guidance when she needed it but never pushing her too hard. He understood that this was a process, that healing didn't happen overnight. And for the first time in a long time, Lily felt like she was in control of her own music again. There was no one telling her what to do, no one critiquing her every move. It was just her, the guitar, and the music. One afternoon, after a particularly productive session, Jake suggested they record one of her songs. "You've got something special, Lily," he said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I think it's time we lay down some tracks and see where it goes." Lily hesitated. The idea of recording again filled her with both excitement and fear. She hadn't stepped into a recording booth since her days with Kyle, and the thought of putting her voice out there again made her stomach twist with anxiety. "I don't know," she said, chewing on her bottom lip. "What if it's not good enough? What if I mess up?" Jake smiled, his expression reassuring. "There's no such thing as perfect, Lily. Music is about emotion, not perfection. And I've heard you play. You've got something real. Trust yourself." Lily took a deep breath, the familiar weight of doubt settling in her chest. But this time, she didn't let it stop her. She had come this far, had taken the first step toward reclaiming her music. She wasn't about to back down now. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "Let's do it." Jake's smile widened, and he led her into the recording booth. As she stood in front of the microphone, guitar in hand, she felt a rush of nerves. But then she closed her eyes and let the music take over. The familiar chords flowed from her fingers, and her voice, though shaky at first, soon found its strength. The song she played was one she had written years ago, back when she had first fallen in love with music. It was a simple melody, but it held a deep meaning for her, a reminder of who she used to be before Kyle and the heartbreak. As she sang, she felt a sense of release, as if she was finally letting go of all the pain and doubt that had been holding her back. When the song ended, Lily opened her eyes to find Jake smiling at her from the other side of the glass. "That was beautiful, Lily," he said through the microphone. "Absolutely beautiful." Lily felt a swell of pride, her heart light with a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in months, she felt like she was on the right path, like she was finally taking control of her life and her music. It wasn't about Kyle anymore. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about her, about finding her voice, about healing, about moving forward. And for the first time, Lily believed that she could do it. Part 7. Finding her voice. Lily's song flowed through the studio speakers, and as she sat with Jake listening to the playback, she couldn't help but feel a sense of amazement. The music coming from the speakers was hers, her voice, her guitar, her words. It was raw and imperfect, but it was real, and that was what made it beautiful. "Wow," Jake said, breaking the silence after the track ended. "That's something special, Lily." Lily blushed, her heart racing. It was hard to accept praise after so many years of being torn down. I still hear all the mistakes, she murmured. Jake shook his head. That's what makes it great. You're not a robot, Lily. You're a musician. You feel things, and that comes through in your music. That's what people connect to. Lily nodded, trying to let Jake's words sink in. She wasn't used to seeing her music as anything more than a series of notes to get right or wrong. For so long, it had been about pleasing Kyle, about living up to his impossible standards. But now, with Jake's support, she was starting to see her music differently, as an extension of herself, flaws and all. After that first recording session, things began to shift for Lily. She spent more time at Sunset Studios, working with Jake to refine her songs and explore new sounds. She wrote new material, tapping into emotions she had kept buried for too long. The songs came to her in waves, some filled with sorrow, others with hope. And with each one, she felt herself healing a little more. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about rediscovering who she was without Kyle's voice in her head, without the weight of his expectations dragging her down. Slowly but surely, Lily was finding her own voice again, both as a musician and as a person. Part 8: Growing Connection. As the weeks went by, Lily and Jake's friendship deepened. They spent hours together in the studio, laughing, talking about music, and sharing stories from their pasts. Jake never pried into her relationship with Kyle, but Lily found herself opening up to him anyway, sharing bits and pieces of the pain she had endured and the reasons she had given up music in the first place. Jake listened without judgment, always offering words of encouragement and support. He had his own stories of heartbreak and struggle, and their shared experiences created a bond that neither of them had expected. One evening, after a particularly long recording session, Jake invited Lily to grab a drink at a nearby bar. They sat in a quiet corner, nursing their beers, and for the first time, Lily felt a sense of ease, a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. "You know," Jake said, taking a sip of his beer, "I've been thinking. You should perform again. Like really perform. Not just for a small crowd at a bar, but something bigger. I think you're ready." Lily's stomach flipped at the suggestion. The thought of performing again, really performing, filled her with both excitement and fear. She hadn't set foot on a real stage since leaving Kyle, and the idea of facing an audience on her own was daunting. "I don't know, Jake," she said, her voice hesitant. "What if I'm not ready? What if I screw up?" Jake gave her a reassuring smile. "You're not going to screw up, Lily. I've seen you play. You've got something real, something that people need to hear. And besides, it's not about being perfect. It's about sharing your story. That's what music is all about." Lily looked down at her drink, her mind racing. She wanted to believe Jake, wanted to believe that she was ready to step back into the spotlight. But the scars from her time with Kyle were still fresh, and the fear of failure lingered in the back of her mind. "I don't know," she said again, her voice soft. "It's just, I've been through a lot. I don't want to put myself out there and get hurt again." Jake reached across the table and gently placed his hand on hers. "I get it, Lily. I really do. But you've already taken the hardest step. You came back to the music. You found your voice again. Now it's time to share it. Lily felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so long hiding from the world, so long believing that she wasn't good enough, that the idea of stepping back into the light felt impossible. But Jake's words resonated with her. Maybe it was time. Maybe she was ready. I'll think about it, she said, her voice shaky but determined. Jake smiled. That's all I ask. Part 9: The Decision. Over the next few days, Lily couldn't stop thinking about Jake's suggestion. The idea of performing again scared her, but it also excited her. She had spent so long running from her fears, hiding from the world, that the thought of stepping back into the spotlight felt both terrifying and exhilarating. But the fear was still there, lurking in the back of her mind like a shadow. What if she wasn't good enough? What if the audience didn't like her? What if she made a fool of herself? One afternoon, Lily found herself sitting on her couch, staring at her guitar. She hadn't picked it up since the last recording session with Jake, and the sight of it brought a rush of emotions. She thought about all the times she had played that guitar for Kyle, all the times he had torn her down with his harsh words and impossible standards. But Jake wasn't Kyle. And this time, she was playing for herself, not for anyone else. With a deep breath, Lily reached for the guitar and began to play. The familiar chords flowed from her fingers, and as she played, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The fear was still there, but it was quieter now, less overwhelming. As the song came to an end, Lily made a decision. She was going to perform. Part 10: The Show. The night of the show arrived sooner than Lily had expected. Jake had arranged for her to perform at a small venue downtown, a cozy space with a stage and an intimate crowd. It wasn't a huge concert, but it was the perfect place for Lily to take her first steps back into the world of live performance. As she stood backstage, her heart pounded in her chest. She could hear the murmur of the audience on the other side of the curtain, and the familiar rush of nerves swept over her. But this time, it wasn't the crippling fear she had felt in the past. It was a different kind of nervousness, a mix of excitement and anticipation. Jake appeared at her side, his smile warm and reassuring. "You're going to be great, Lily. Just remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about sharing your story." Lily nodded, taking a deep breath. She had practiced her set over and over again, refining her songs until they felt like extensions of herself. Each song told a piece of her story, her journey from heartbreak to healing, from silence to finding her voice again. The stage manager gave her a nod, signaling that it was time. Lily's heart raced as she stepped onto the stage, the bright lights blinding her for a moment. The audience applauded, and as she sat down with her guitar, she took another deep breath, steadying herself. For a moment, she felt the familiar flicker of doubt, the old voice in her head telling her she wasn't good enough, that she didn't belong here. But then she looked out at the audience and saw Jake, sitting in the front row, his eyes filled with pride and encouragement. And with that, the doubt faded. Lily began to play, her fingers moving over the strings with a newfound confidence. The notes filled the room, and as she sang the first line of her song, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. The music flowed from her, raw and real, and the audience listened, captivated by her story. As the set went on, Lily lost herself in the music. She wasn't thinking about Kyle or the pain he had caused her. She wasn't thinking about the past or the fears that had once held her back. She was fully present, fully alive, sharing her music with the world. When the final song came to an end, the audience erupted into applause, and Lily felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had done it. She had faced her fears, stepped back into the spotlight, and reclaimed her voice. As she stepped off the stage, Jake was waiting for her, his eyes shining with pride. "You were amazing," he said, pulling her into a hug. Lily smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you for everything." Jake pulled back, looking at her with a warmth that made her heart skip a beat. "You did this, Lily. You found your way back. I just helped you along the way." Lily felt a surge of emotion as she looked at Jake. She had spent so long believing that she had to do everything on her own, that accepting help meant weakness. But now, standing here with him, she realized that she didn't have to carry everything on her own. For the first time in a long time, Lily felt whole. Part 11: The Highs and Lows. After the success of her first performance, Lily's confidence began to grow. She felt like she was finally taking control of her life again, embracing her passion for music without the weight of the past dragging her down. The positive energy from the show fueled her creativity, and she found herself writing new songs almost daily. Jake continued to be a constant presence in her life, helping her refine her music and encouraging her to push her boundaries. Their friendship grew stronger with each passing day, and while there was a clear connection between them that went beyond just music, neither of them had addressed it directly. One afternoon, as they sat together in the studio listening to a new track Lily had recorded, Jake turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I think it's time you start thinking about putting together an EP," he said. "You've got enough material, and your songs tell a really powerful story." Lily blinked, caught off guard by the suggestion. "An EP? You really think I'm ready for that?" Jake smiled. "Absolutely. You're more than ready. People need to hear your music, Lily. You've got something real, something that resonates. I know it's a big step, but I think it's the right one." Lily felt a surge of excitement at the idea. The thought of releasing her own EP, her own music, her own voice, was something she had always dreamed of, but it also terrified her. Putting her songs out into the world meant being vulnerable in a way she hadn't been before. It meant sharing her story with strangers, opening herself up to both praise and criticism. "I don't know," she said, her voice filled with uncertainty. "What if people don't like it? What if it's not good enough?" Jake reached over and gently placed his hand on hers, his touch warm and reassuring. "You can't control what people think. But you've already proven that you have something worth sharing. And it's not about being good enough. It's about being true to yourself." Lily looked into his eyes, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that her music mattered. And with Jake by her side, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could take the leap. "Okay," she said, her voice soft but determined. "Let's do it." Part 12: A New Chapter. Over the next few months, Lily poured herself into creating her EP. The process was intense, but it was also exhilarating. She worked tirelessly, recording new tracks, refining old ones, and collaborating with Jake to shape the sound of the project. Every song told a piece of her story, the highs, the lows, the heartbreak, and the healing. For the first time in a long time, Lily felt like she was in control of her own narrative. The music wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about expressing herself, about sharing her truth with the world. As the release date for the EP approached, Lily's nerves started to creep back in. She knew that once the EP was out, it would no longer be just hers. It would belong to everyone who listened to it, and that thought both excited and terrified her. The night before the EP's release, Jake invited Lily to dinner at his apartment. They had been spending more time together outside of the studio, and while their relationship had remained platonic, there was an undeniable chemistry between them that neither of them could ignore. As they sat together on Jake's couch, eating takeout and talking about the final touches on the EP, Lily felt a sense of contentment that she hadn't felt in years. She had spent so long feeling lost, but now, with Jake by her side and her music ready to be shared with the world, she felt like she was finally where she was meant to be. "You know," Jake said, setting his empty takeout container on the coffee table, "I'm really proud of you, Lily. You've come so far. And I don't just mean with the music. You've found your voice again. That's not an easy thing to do." Lily smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." Jake shook his head. "No, this was all you. I just helped you along the way." There was a long pause, and the air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken emotions. Lily's heart raced as she looked into Jake's eyes, the connection between them more palpable than ever. "I don't know what I would have done without you," Lily whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Jake reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. "You're stronger than you think, Lily. You always have been." Lily felt her breath catch in her throat as Jake leaned in, his lips inches from hers. For a moment, everything else faded away, the music, the EP, the nerves about the release, and all that mattered was the way Jake made her feel. Safe. Seen. Loved. And then, before she could second-guess herself, she closed the distance between them, their lips meeting in a soft, tender kiss. It wasn't rushed or passionate, it was gentle, filled with the unspoken understanding that this moment had been a long time coming. When they finally pulled apart, Lily's heart was pounding, but it wasn't out of fear. It was out of hope. Hope for the future, hope for her music, hope for whatever was growing between her and Jake. "I've wanted to do that for a while," Jake admitted with a sheepish smile. Lily laughed, her nerves melting away. "Me too." Part 13, the EP release. The day of the EP release arrived, and Lily was a bundle of nerves. She had spent the entire morning pacing around her apartment, checking her phone for updates, and trying to distract herself from the gnawing anxiety in her stomach. Jake had assured her that everything would be fine, but Lily couldn't shake the fear of what would happen once her music was out in the world. Would people like it? Would they connect with it? Or would it be ignored, lost in the sea of other artists trying to make a name for themselves? By midday, the EP was live on streaming platforms, and Lily's phone started buzzing with notifications, messages from friends, social media posts, and even a few comments from strangers who had stumbled upon her music. At first, Lily was too nervous to look. But when she finally worked up the courage to check her phone, she was overwhelmed by the response. People were listening. People were connecting with her music. And, most importantly, people were relating to her story. One comment, in particular, stood out. "Lily, your music speaks to me in a way I can't describe. I've been through a tough breakup, and your songs have helped me heal. Thank you for sharing your story." Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes as she read the comment. This was why she had made the EP, this was why she had decided to put her music out into the world. Not to become famous, not to prove anything, but to connect with people. To let others know that they weren't alone in their pain, that healing was possible. By the end of the day, the EP had gained a modest following, and Lily was starting to feel the weight of her fears lifting. She had done it. She had shared her music with the world, and people were listening. Later that evening, Jake came over to celebrate. They sat on the couch, a bottle of champagne between them, and toasted to the success of the EP. "You did it," Jake said, his voice filled with pride. "I knew you would." Lily smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you." Jake leaned in and kissed her softly, and for the first time in a long time, Lily felt like everything was falling into place. Her music, her relationship with Jake, her sense of self, it was all coming together in a way she hadn't expected. And for the first time in years, Lily felt hopeful about the future. Part 14, A New Journey. As the weeks passed, Lily's EP continued to gain traction. She started getting invitations to perform at local venues, and her social media following grew as more and more people discovered her music. It wasn't an overnight success, but it was steady, and Lily was content with that. Her relationship with Jake deepened as well. They spent more time together, not just in the studio, but in their personal lives. Their connection went beyond music. It was built on trust, understanding, and the shared experience of healing from their pasts. One evening, after a particularly successful show at a local venue, Jake surprised Lily with an idea. "I've been thinking," he said as they sat together in the green room, basking in the afterglow of the performance. "What if we went on tour? A small one, just a few cities." "I think you're ready." Lily's eyes widened in surprise. "A tour? You really think I could do that?" Jake grinned. "I know you can. You've already proven that you can perform. Now it's time to take your music to new places, reach new audiences. And I'll be with you every step of the way." Lily's heart raced at the thought of going on tour. It was a big step, one she hadn't even considered. But with Jake by her side, she felt like anything was possible. "I like the sound of that," she said. Part 15, On the Road. A few months after the release of Lily's EP, she and Jake found themselves packing up a van, ready to hit the road for her first ever tour. It wasn't a massive, glamorous affair, just a handful of cities, small venues, and intimate crowds, but for Lily, it was a dream come true. She couldn't believe how far she had come, from the girl who had walked away from music, to the artist who was now taking her songs to audiences across the country. Their first stop was a small club in Philadelphia, a cozy space with a stage that felt just right for her acoustic set. As she stood backstage, tuning her guitar, she felt the familiar mix of nerves and excitement swirling in her chest. This was the next big step, and while part of her was terrified, the other part was ready, more than ready. Jake appeared at her side, his reassuring smile instantly calming her nerves. "You've got this," he said softly, resting a hand on her shoulder. "They're going to love you." Lily nodded, taking a deep breath. She had done this before, performed in front of crowds, shared her story through her music, but this felt different. Bigger. The stakes were higher now, not because she had anything to prove, but because this was her moment. Her music. Her journey. When the lights dimmed and the announcer introduced her, Lily stepped onto the stage, her guitar in hand, and faced the crowd. The applause was warm, welcoming, and as she strummed the first chord, she felt the music flow through her like a river, carrying her nerves away. The first song was a hit. Then the next, and the one after that. By the time she finished her set, the crowd was on their feet, cheering, and Lily felt like she was floating. This was why she had come back to music. This was why she had fought through the pain and fear. She had something to say, and people were listening. After the show, fans lingered by the stage, eager to meet her and tell her how much her music meant to them. One young woman, in particular, stood out, a girl about Lily's age with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Your music saved me," the girl said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I went through something similar. I thought I'd never heal. But your songs, they gave me hope. Thank you." Lily felt a lump in her throat as she hugged the girl, her heart swelling with a deep sense of gratitude. This was what it was all about. It wasn't about fame or success, it was about connecting with people, sharing her story, and helping others feel less alone. As Lily and Jake packed up the van that night, she couldn't stop smiling. The tour was off to an incredible start, and the sense of fulfillment she felt was more than she had ever imagined. And it was only the beginning. Part 16, The Journey continues. The days on the road were long but rewarding. Lily played shows in small clubs and cafes, each one offering a new opportunity to connect with her audience. The tour wasn't glamorous. They slept in budget hotels and ate fast food more often than she cared to admit, but it was an adventure, and Lily loved every minute of it. Jake was with her every step of the way, always encouraging her, always helping her stay grounded. Their relationship had deepened even more during the tour, and by the time they reached their final stop in Chicago, Lily couldn't imagine doing any of this without him. Chicago was the biggest show of the tour, a small but renowned venue known for showcasing up-and-coming artists. The crowd was larger than any she had played for so far, and as she stood backstage, waiting for her cue, the familiar rush of nerves hit her again. Jake was there, as always, with his calm, steady presence. "This is it," he said with a grin. "The big finale." Lily laughed nervously. "Yeah, no pressure, right?" "You've got this," Jake said, his voice filled with certainty. "You always do." Lily smiled, her heart swelling with love for him. He had been her rock through all of this, and she knew that whatever happened tonight, she was ready because he was by her side. When the time came, Lily stepped onto the stage, her guitar in hand, and faced the crowd. The lights were bright, the room buzzing with energy, and as she strummed the first chord, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. This was where she belonged. The set went flawlessly. Each song resonated with the crowd, the connection between Lily and the audience palpable. When she played the final note, the applause was deafening, and Lily couldn't help the tears that welled up in her eyes. This was it. This was everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for. As she left the stage, Jake was waiting for her with open arms. "You were incredible," he said, pulling her into a tight hug. Lily laughed, wiping away her tears. "I couldn't have done it without you." Jake looked down at her, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before. "Lily, there's something I've been meaning to tell you." Lily's heart skipped a beat, her pulse quickening. "What is it?" Jake hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I love you, Lily. I've loved you for a while now. And I know we've been through a lot, but I just want you to know that whatever happens, I'm here. For you. Always." Lily's breath caught in her throat, her heart swelling with emotion. She had known, of course. She had felt it growing between them for months. But hearing Jake say the words out loud made it real in a way she hadn't expected. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "So much." Jake smiled, his eyes bright with happiness, and he kissed her softly, right there backstage, with the sounds of the crowd still echoing in the background. It wasn't the grand, dramatic moment she had imagined, but it was perfect. It was real. And it was just the beginning of their next chapter. Part 17, A Future Together. After the tour, life slowed down a bit, but things didn't return to the way they had been. Lily's music continued to gain momentum, and with Jake by her side, she felt more confident than ever in pursuing her dreams. The EP had opened doors she hadn't even imagined, and before long, she was getting calls from other musicians, producers, and industry professionals who wanted to collaborate with her. But no matter how far her music took her, Lily never lost sight of what was most important: the connection she had with her fans, the people who related to her story and found healing through her songs. She continued to write from the heart, sharing her experiences and using her music as a way to connect with others. Jake remained her biggest supporter, and their relationship blossomed into something strong and steady. They moved in together, and while life wasn't always easy, there were still moments of doubt, still challenges to face. They faced them together. One evening, after a long day in the studio, Lily and Jake sat together on the couch, the soft glow of the city lights filtering through the window. They were both exhausted but content, their hands intertwined as they watched the world outside. "You know," Jake said, his voice soft, "I've been thinking. We've built something pretty amazing here." Lily smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Yeah, we have." Jake was quiet for a moment, then he turned to face her, his eyes filled with a kind of seriousness she hadn't seen before. "I want to keep building this. With you. Forever." Lily's heart skipped a beat as she looked up at him, her pulse quickening. "What are you saying?" Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. "Lily, will you marry me?" Lily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. She hadn't expected this, not tonight, not like this, but as she looked into Jake's eyes, she knew there was only one answer. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Jake grinned, slipping the ring onto her finger, and as he pulled her into his arms, Lily felt like everything had come full circle. She had been broken once, but now, she was whole. She had found her voice, her music, and her love. And with Jake by her side, she was ready for whatever the future held. Part 18, the next song. Lily's journey had been long and difficult, filled with heartache, doubt, and fear. But through it all, she had found something worth fighting for: her music, her voice, and the love that had grown between her and Jake. As they stood together on the stage at their wedding reception, surrounded by friends, family, and fans, Lily picked up her guitar one last time for the night. She strummed the familiar chords, her heart filled with gratitude for everything she had been through, everything she had learned, and everything she had yet to experience. "This one's for you," she said, her eyes locking with Jake's as she began to play. The song was new, but the emotions behind it were familiar: hope, love, and the promise of a future filled with music, laughter, and endless possibilities. Part 19, a new song. And as Lily sang the final note, the room erupted in applause. But this time, the applause didn't feel like validation or proof that she had succeeded. It wasn't about seeking approval or acknowledgement. It was about sharing a piece of herself, her journey, her love, and knowing that the people who mattered most were there to witness it. Jake smiled at her from across the stage, his eyes shining with love and pride. Lily felt her heart swell with emotion, and in that moment, she knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. They had already been through so much together, healing from their pasts, finding their way back to themselves and each other, and now, they had a future to look forward to. It wouldn't always be easy, but they were ready for whatever came next. The guests at the reception cheered as Jake made his way to her, wrapping his arms around her and kissing her in front of everyone. There was laughter and light-hearted shouts from the crowd, and Lily felt herself melt into the moment, realizing that this wasn't just a performance or a milestone in her career, it was a celebration of everything she had overcome and everything she had gained. When they finally pulled away from each other, Jake whispered in her ear, "You were amazing, as always." Lily grinned, playfully nudging him. "Well, you've always been my biggest fan." They both laughed, their foreheads touching as they basked in the joy of the moment. It was a moment of pure happiness, one that Lily knew she would treasure for the rest of her life. Part 20, building a life together. Life after their wedding settled into a beautiful rhythm, one filled with music, love, and adventure. Lily continued to write and record songs, but now, her music took on a new tone, a tone of hope, of resilience, of love that had been earned through struggle. Every time she played, she thought of how far she had come, and it only made her music stronger. Her EP had turned into a full album, one that gained even more traction than she had expected. Critics praised her for her raw authenticity, and fans connected deeply with her vulnerability and honesty. She started playing larger venues, touring with more established musicians, and gaining a reputation as an artist who wasn't afraid to bare her soul. Jake continued to be by her side, managing the tour logistics, offering his creative insights and being her rock through it all. They traveled together, explored new cities, and made memories that they would carry with them forever. Their relationship deepened in ways Lily hadn't imagined possible, and every day felt like a new adventure with him. But even with the success, the growing fan base, and the increasing recognition, Lily never lost sight of why she had started in the first place. She wasn't in this for the fame or the accolades, she was in it to connect with people, to share her story, and to remind others that no matter how broken they might feel, healing was always possible. Part 21, Coming Full Circle. One evening, after a long day of recording in the studio, Lily found herself sitting on the couch with Jake, her guitar resting on her lap. The familiar warmth of their home wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, and she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. It had been years since she had left Kyle, years since she had walked away from the music that had once defined her. Back then, she had felt broken, lost, and unsure of who she was without someone else's voice guiding her. But now, she knew exactly who she was. She was Lily Parker, the girl who had found her way back to herself, who had reclaimed her voice, and who had built a life filled with love, music, and meaning. Jake glanced over at her, sensing the introspective look on her face. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, his tone playful. Lily smiled softly, strumming a few chords on her guitar. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," she said. "How different things are now compared to when I first walked into Sunset Studios." Jake nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, it feels like a lifetime ago." Lily paused for a moment, then looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me. For being there when I didn't even believe in myself." Jake leaned over and kissed her forehead gently. "I'll always believe in you, Lily. Always." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the gentle hum of the guitar filling the space between them. It was a peaceful moment, one that reminded Lily of how far she had come and how much she had to look forward to. Finally, after a few minutes, Jake broke the silence. "So, what's next for you, Mrs. Parker?" Lily laughed, shaking her head. "I guess we'll just have to wait and see." But deep down, she knew. Whatever came next, whether it was more albums, more tours, or even a new chapter in her personal life, she was ready for it. She was ready for whatever life had in store because she knew that no matter what, she had her music, her voice, and the love of the man who had helped her find her way back to herself. Part 22, The Legacy of the Broken Guitar. Years later, Lily stood backstage at the biggest venue she had ever played, an arena filled with thousands of fans who had come to hear her music. It was a moment she had once only dreamed of, a moment that seemed impossible during those dark days when she had thought she would never play again. But here she was, about to take the stage in front of a crowd that had grown to love her not just for her music, but for the story behind it. Her journey from heartbreak to healing had inspired countless people, and her songs had become anthems of resilience for those who needed them most. As she waited for her cue, Lily glanced down at the guitar in her hands, the same battered, worn-out guitar she had held onto all those years ago. It had been through so much with her, and despite its age and imperfections, it was still her favorite instrument to play. It wasn't perfect, just like she wasn't perfect. But it was hers, and that made it beautiful. The lights dimmed, and the crowd erupted into cheers as Lily stepped onto the stage. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar rush of energy that always came before a performance, and smiled as she strummed the first chord. This was her life now. This was her legacy. The girl with the broken guitar had become the woman who found her voice. And as her music filled the arena, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, because she had already proven that she could rise above anything. And her music would always carry her through.